Hello guys, welcome to this tutorial JavaScript variables and types. This tutorial is very fundamental. Please should understand it before we move ahead. So make sure you can watch it many times as you want, but you should definitely understand the concept of variables and types. Also, if you have not yet subscribed, please go back, subscribe, and then let's talk about variables and types in JavaScript. So JavaScript is a loosely typed language. This means that you can use the same variable for different types of information, but you may also have to check what type of variable is yourself if the differences matter. For example, if you wanted to add two numbers but one variable turned out to be a string, the result wouldn't necessarily be what you expected. So, variable declaration, how to actually declare a variable in JavaScript. So, variables are commonly explicitly declared by the var statement. Var. So this one is actually a language, a JavaScript keyword to declare a variable. Let me just declare a variable, say number. So I'm actually declaring this number, since this var keyword is just in front of or behind this number. This number is actually be seen as a variable. So we use the keyword var, V-A-R to declare a variable in JavaScript. So doing so is obligatory. If the code includes the string commands, use the string. As we are going to see later, we are going to talk a bit about the use string in JavaScript a bit later in the upcoming tutorial. So the above variable is created. This variable is created but has the default value of undefined. So the default value, since we did not assign anything to it, is actually hold it on an undefined value, which is a default value. To be of value, the variable needs to be initialized. So let me just initialize this to be 0. That means we declare a variable called number and then initialize this to be 0 initially. But after being declared, a variable may be assigned a new value that will replace the old one. That means later on in my code, I don't know, after doing or writing some code here, let me just say some code, I can now change this number to be actually something like 5. So there's no problem, as its name suggests. So it's a variable. But make sure to declare a variable with var, var, please. This is the keyword to declare a variable. Or while assigning, if you do not declare a variable, let's assume that you just create a name and then don't assign picture to it. As you can see there, this Visual Studio is not recognizing this name to be a variable because we did not declare in using the var keyword. So otherwise you will create what is called a scope bug. So please, it's very important to put the var keyword in front of what you're actually creating. So it's very important. As you can see now, is everything is okay now. We also have what we call primitive types. So primitive types are types provided by the system, in this case by the JavaScript. So primitive type for JavaScript are booleans, numbers, and text. In addition to the primitive types, users may define their own classes, as we are going to see later. The primitive types are created by JavaScript as value types, and when they pass to a function, they are passed as value. Some types, such as string, allow method calls. So now let's go and look for what is actually a Boolean type. If you're a little bit familiar with computer science, you actually don't know what Boolean means. So Boolean variables can only have two possible values, that is true or false. Let's actually declare a variable called, I don't know, bool to be equals to false. So this bool is actually a Boolean type of assigned value or initial value set to false. It can of course also be true. So this is actually a Boolean variable. We also have numeric types. You can use an integer and or double types on your variables, but they are treated as a numeric type. So you can declare, as we saw before, let's just say x to be equals to 5 here. So you're actually declaring an integer, or also you can say y or is equal to 5.6. This is a double, and this one is an integer. This is a double, but they are treated as numeric value. So you see that JavaScript is not too strict about the type of a variable like in C programming, for example. So let's go now and look for the string. But of course, you can, after declaring base, you can of course assign another value to it. Say, like for example, you can say that x equals to Peter. There is no problem. So that's the problem that beginners face about with JavaScript, as they are from maybe C programming or another language that is statically typed. So you see that x, which was initially a number, becomes now a string. It's very possible. So, but you should not do that, please. Just be organized, and then everything will be fine. So this one is not good practice, but actually it will work. So we also have what we call the string types. The string and char types are all strings. So you can build any string literal that you wish for without problem. So actually having something like, let's just say name, or my name equals to Joel. This is actually my name. So programming with Joel, remember. So this one is actually a string, but of course you can also declare a character. Let me just see. Oh, this one is a character. C, for example, letter C, yeah. But the two are treated as strings. So it's very different. If you're from C background, you see that everything is quite different here. So this is the overall idea about Boolean, numeric types, and string types. So of course you can change that later on, but this how it works for strings, numeric value, and boolean. We also have complex types. A complex type is an object, be either standard or custom made. Its home is the heap and is always passed by reference. Of course, don't care about that for now. We are going to see what we mean pass by reference or pass by value later on in this course. So we have array type, that is one under the complex types. We have the array type. In JavaScript, all arrays are untyped, so you can put everything you want in the array and worry about that later. Arrays are objects. They are method and property you can invoke at will. For example, the .length property indicates how many items are currently in the array. Let's assume that if you add more items to the array, the value of the .length gets larger. You can build yourself an array by using the statement new followed by array as shown here. So let me just declare a variable called my array to be equals to new array. Yeah, let me just put some value there, some values, say 0, 2, 9, and that will be okay. But also, so this is one way to declare array, but of course don't worry about that, about arrays. We are going to this an entire tutorial, or let us say even 2 tutorials on arrays. This is just to give you a broad ideas about arrays or types in JavaScript. So of course there's also another way to declare array. Say for, let us say, other array to be something like equals to, can just put those number there and so on. So this is one way you can also do it, of course. But of course, as I said, don't worry about that for now. We are going to discuss about array in a little bit in the upcoming tutorials. So arrays are accessed using the square brackets. So that means if I want to access, say for example, this 5 and maybe alert the 5, I'm going to say my array of 5 is actually at the second position, which is actually 1, because we start from 0 to index the array elements. As I said, don't bother too much about that for now, but this is just I'm just saying to give you a broad ideas about array and variables and so on. So if you want to get this element, you can just access it by saying, this my array of 1, because indexes, as just sort of saying, start from index 0, index 1, index 2, and so on. So and there is no limit for the number of items that can be stored in an array. So you can store infinite as you want. So the only limit can be just your RAM, or I don't, something like that. You also have what we call object types. An object within JavaScript is created using the new operator. So let me just say here my object. Again, don't worry about object for now. We are also going to talk about that a little bit in the upcoming tutorial. So just say new object. So other object can also be created with the object notation, which uses the curly braces. So another way to create an object can also be, let's just say, other object is to use the curly braces to create that. But again, don't worry too much about that. So JavaScript objects can implement inheritance and support overriding, and you can use the polymorphism. Of course, those terms are a little bit strange, but we are going to discover that later. There are no scope modifiers, with all properties and method having public access. So more information on creating objects can be found in the later tutorials. So you can access browser built-in object and objects provider through your browser extensions. Again, I hope you got the point. So you also have what we call the scope. So in JavaScript, the scope is the current context of the code. It refers to the accessibility of functions and variables and their context. So there exists a global and local scope. The understanding of scope is crucial to writing good code, please. Whenever the code accesses this, it accesses the object that owns the current scope. So the global scope, an entity like a function or variable has global scope. So if it is accessible from everywhere in the code, it is said to be in the global scope. So this variable, for example, this my array, is accessible from anywhere in my code. So this is actually called a global, is actually in the global scope. So let me write here a function to say print hello. That's the name of the function, but of course don't care about that. We have not yet talked about function, so don't care about that for now. Just say alert hello. So this is actually a function that just prints hello to the screen. And if I want to like use the function, and again, this tutorial is not an actual tutorial on functions, it's just to show you how what the context or the meaning of global scope and so on. So here we actually invoked the print hello world function, which is actually in the global scope. So here, please, the variable is in the global scope and accessible both in the main code path and the function hello itself. So let's just say, let me declare a variable here called a equals to say 6, and within this function let me also declare a variable called a again, you see, with the same name. Let's just give the value 5 to 8. This a is in this function print hello world scope within these curly braces. So this a is not accessible, it's just within this function, is in the scope of this print hello function. But of course this a is accessible from everywhere, but again, don't worry about that for now. This quite complex things behind that, but it's just to show you the concept of scope here. I hope you got the point out from that. So this a now is actually in the local scope of this print hello world function. So a local scope exists when an entity is defined in a certain code path, like this function as you can see there. So this a can be used anywhere in the code since it's not in a specific function or something else. So we can use this a everywhere, but this, of course, we can just understand that this second a is within this function scope. So you cannot actually, if you want to print some a here, normally it's this 6 that is going to print, but as I'm saying, there's some complexity behind this, as we are going to see later. So let me also tell you something. Is a variable in JavaScript are actually holding. That means if you are from C programming, you cannot actually, you know that you cannot actually use a variable without declaring it before. But in JavaScript, it's possible. That's what we call variable housing. That means housing. So if I declare, let me just say print or alert, let me just say x, or let me just take or something that I've not yet done, date. So let me just alert date variable. We all know that I've not yet declared the variable called date. I can declare it later on. So say date. Here I'm actually using something after I'm declaring it. So it's possible in JavaScript. That's what we call variable is holding. So as you declare any variable, when it actually wants to interpret this JavaScript code, the variable is all the variables are actually housed to the top of the code before everything is interpreted. So that's how it works in JavaScript, but in C you cannot do that, of course, or C++ or another kind of language. So in JavaScript you can use a variable and declare it later on, but of course you cannot use a variable without declaring it. So I hope guys you enjoy this tutorial and you understand and you are actually understanding, or you understood the concept behind the variables and types in JavaScript. Please, if it's not too clear for you for now, it's normal, but you can watch this video many times as you want to get the point from there, because it's very important. Thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and see you next.